Well, hello. This is Child Psychology. It's the founding theories and research. Uh, so I want to jump right in and work on and take a look at Erickson's stages of personality development. So you can look at where you are at in this class. Um, Most of you are probably in 13 to 21 years or 21 to 39 years and trying to figure out who you are, your job, or jobs. Do you go to school or not go to school? Is psychology for you? Is it not for you? But we're going to jump back, 20 years, and we're going to go back to when you were an infant and really dive into trust versus mistrust and autonomy versus shame and doubt. They're really big issues in the beginning of our development. But as we go through this class, this is going to be a main jump off point for our class to talk about Erickson's stages and um, his conflicts in these age ranges that he provides. So, for example, when you're are an infant to 18 months, you have trust versus mistrust, which means if your parent took care of you and they were a good provider and you cried, they fed you, changed you, did everything that you could, if they helped you do things, read books, stuff like that, if you were well taken care of, then he says you should have a trusting personality. If your parent left you to cry all the time, didn't feed you at will, but didn't change you, they didn't take care of those needs, he says you could be a mistrustful person. Now, when we talk about this, we're not talking in 100% definitives. We're saying that this is Erickson's theory about how your personality develops as a child. Now, you don't have to agree with this stuff, but there is research that backs up, the overall gist of using this in our class. So that's trust versus mistrust. So you think about your own childhood, and this is what you want to do in this class is really focus on how you were treated, or how you see your parents treat you, or how your aunts, uncles, grandparents, all those things feed into, are you a or a trusting person or a mistrusting person? And think about it, or if you get a girlfriend or boyfriend, are you jealous? Are you like, where are you? You're 3 minutes late coming home from work. I didn't see any traffic reports that said there was traffic. You know, that's jealousy. That's mistrusting. If you're like, he'll be home soon. He always comes home, or she always comes home, or they always come home. Um, you you probably had a trusting relationship along your development. So this is the beginning. So I want to start with that. Um, there are some other stages. This is a Piaget's chart that shows how we develop through four stages. It's a very simple chart like Erickson's, but it's worthwhile to go over because in that beginning birth to 2 years, sensory motor means how you move and how you interact with the environment around you. From birth to 2 years, you understand the world through putting things in your mouth, through cooing, through screaming and crying to see if people come to you, right? And that takes us back to that trust versus mistrust in Erickson stage. Like if you're crying and no one's coming, well, that's not working for you. You have to do something different. And we'll talk about my kids and our development as we go through this, so you get um, a little bit of an experience outside of your own. And then you'll see the pre-operational stages from 2 to 7 years, and then as we move on, we'll go through the rest of it. But um, in Piaget stages, as you move on, your development gets very, very concrete, which is something you can see, you can touch, you can watch the person prove that they have these conceptual developmental stages they either attained or did not. And it's pretty cool. And that's one of the things our videos are an assignment's gonna be on a video of Piaget stages that you're gonna get to look at. So this is neat. Um, all right, so now you know where we're starting. Let's talk about our goals. Our goals in this class are important. Um, Obviously, goal one, let's pass this class, right? But what is another goal that you might have for this class? Do you want to learn how to work with kids? Do you want to teach kids in the future? Obviously, that's what I do. I love teaching. At college, I love teaching elementary kids. I just like being around the personalities of young people and the ideas that they bring and the energy they bring every single day. It's really neat, and that's always a goal of mine, to go into every semester and every school year looking for those new things. Um, so, in your goal, how do you want to achieve that goal? So, in our class, I try to achieve goals through giving you projects that I think will stimulate your mind, make you think. Maybe they'll make you argue with each other a little bit, and that's good. Healthy arguments are fine as long as they're not violent or aggressive or out of control. It's okay to argue a little bit, debate about what's going on, debate about what you think. Um, you know, in our world, we can't even agree on um, something like a religion. Um, Hopefully, we're tolerant of other people's religions, but everything has its stages, and if you pick one topic, you're never going to get 100% of people agree with you. But in this class, it's going to be very unlikely that a whole class will agree on how to raise a kid, or how do we punish a kid, or how much should we hold a kid, what kind of music should we listen to. Like, all those things are variables in our lives, and we have to be ready for those. So I'll tell you a story about, I have two Uncle Bills, one on each side, my mom's side, one on my dad's side. Two of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Um, they My Uncle Bill on my dad's side told me one time, he's he said, the best part about having these parties when we're over his house is when you get to hang out with the kids. He said adults are boring. He's like, we talk about the same stuff all the time. It's news, money, weather, blah blah blah. And it didn't really click for like 5 more years before I realized, like, he's right. Like, adults are kind of boring. After you hit a certain age, you'll talk about your ailments or the things I just mentioned. And I started to notice every time I went over there, he would always gravitate towards the kids. And I think I do that. My other Uncle Bill is more of like a task focused worker. He likes kids. He loves kids, and he helped take care of me when my my mom was raising my sister and I as a single parent, and my aunt and uncle would take me to their house over the weekend, and they would um, teach me all kinds of stuff, like how to cut the lawn, painting. We built a bike together. But every morning we would have tasks that we had to get done. You have to go to the dry cleaners, you have to go to the shop right, you have to go to pick up any supplies we need for the week, and just plan out a really good flow of your weekend, and then plan out what you need for the next week. And that was really crucial to, I think, my development, because I'm a huge planner. So my Uncle Bill and my mom were big planners in my life, and I think that really helped me to develop and grow to what I am today. So those my two Uncle Bills, were really crucial in my development of how I think about kids, and the tasks that I put forth so we learn. All right, so development. We're focusing on the physical parts, the cognitive parts, how we think about things, and the psychosocial parts. How do we interact with each other? And one of the biggest parts of this is called social construction. We construct knowledge through being with other people. And if you'll see this, as soon as kids start playing with other kids, you'll start to see them, well, he does it this way, or Billy doesn't wear red, he only wears blues. So kids will start to take that and think about it. Or I don't wear an Eagles jersey, I wear a Cowboys jersey. I hope you don't, but Cowboys jersey. So the Eagles were always a big thing in my life because all my buddies liked the Eagles, my family liked the Eagles, so we were like diehard Eagles fans. So that shapes your development. When someone's like, "Oh, Dallas is in town," "Oh, you boo Dallas, boo boo boo," but um, we all grew up differently. So I had a couple friends that were Dallas fans. So as I grew up, and we would always heckle each other and things. So that's social construction. How do we identify with things? How do we think about how other people are related to us, which makes us gravitate toward them? And how are people different from us, which makes us criticize other people? So we'll talk about that. An important part, you probably went over this in Psych 101, was heredity versus environment. Um, what matters more? Is the heredity, our genes, more important than the environment we're brought up in? We'll talk more about that as the class goes on. I think a big part is your maturation, how much you mature, how fast you mature, and what you went through in your past. I think those are two really big things that you have to focus on. Um, you might see a 20-year-old male who is really well put together and is in college and just has his life together, holding down a good job, making money. And then you can see a 25-year-old male with none of the right things going for him. All right. Now, that could be his history. It could be his maturation process, how mature he is, how mature his brain is, how he's thinking about life. It could be that he had no guidance, right? That's your environment. So you can't always blame everything on your genes. You can't blame mom and dad for everything. So um, our family lives, you'll see there is nuclear, that's your family you live with. There's extended family. And I always think of like a backyard barbecue, your extended family coming, 20, 30 people coming over, hanging out, and then you throw friends in there. We'll talk about that as we move on. Your culture and ethnic group you identify with. We all identify with something. I was raised as we are Italian Americans, we're Irish Americans, we're Welsh Americans. We're all like a melting pot in our family. And the last factor that we'll talk about here and there is going to be your socioeconomic status. That's the money your family makes. How much money do they make? And what position are they in our society? Parenting. It says, how does parenting affect the three major domains? So, poverty. So, think about poverty for a second. The physical, cognitive, and psychosocial well-being of poverty. So, think of the risk factors involved in being poor and growing up. They don't have enough food, physical. If your parents are always working, you're probably not stimulated cognitively. You're probably watching TV, or playing video games or doing something that's not as stimulating as having a conversation at dinner and talking about your day and learning from mistakes. Um, your psychosocial well-being, if your parents are working and you're on a gaming system and there's a chance that you are either heckling or being heckled online. All right, I don't want that to happen, but that's a likelihood. You might be playing with a bunch of your friends and you guys are all yelling, just loud and just being crazy, but not heckling or being rude, right? So those are some things that might happen when your parents are there or not there. Sometimes your parents will jump in and maybe they'll do some of the loud craziness too. So risk factors for being poor, you don't grow right. That's a big physical issue. Cognitively, if you don't have the right nutritional value in your diet, it could affect the way you think about things and your psychosocial well-being. I had a student in my class who was never allowed outside after school, never. So they weren't allowed to hang out with friends. They weren't allowed to do anything. So that really killed their social life. So when they came back to school, like they were really, really in need of social interaction. So of course they got in trouble a lot for talking, but after I figured out that what was going on at home, uh, you got to give that kid a little more leeway than others. Right. Some of this stuff we'll go over real quick, but we're not going to dwell on it like we have been. This is normative versus non-normative. Normative is where group understands it together. So kids and young adults at your age, you are computer whizzes, most of you. You really take tech and run with it. Non-normative groups are unusual events for a person or group. So think of someone who is um, 70 years old. Like it could be your grandparents, maybe your great grandparents, trying to get on the computer and use it. Did you ever see someone struggle like that? Um, you guys were, some of you guys might not have been alive for 9/11 and the Twin Towers coming down and the planes coming down and terrorist attack. So that's not an event you would remember, but it is one I remember. Um, some people start college at the age of 12, right? That's an unusual event. I just saw someone on the news, 5-year old, they're a piano whiz. That's wild. So these are events that you don't normally have or you don't share with other people because they might not be in your cohort, which is your age group, or they might have a talent or skill that you didn't, or they could have a history that you don't, like deaths of a parent, you survived some kind of crazy car crash or event. Um, so Konrad Lorenz, he has this concept of imprinting. So it's a form of learning where you, as soon as you are born, you form a bond with the first person you see. Now, I think of this as movies. Do you ever see like Duckling that uh, sees a rooster the first time and they're like, oh, the rooster's my dad. And the rooster's not your dad because you're a duck. So, and they'll follow the other animal around. It's wild, but that's what imprinting is. So that's something that we all have, and that's something I wanted to mention because we're going to get to that in a minute. In psychology, everything is related. You can't just section one piece of something and say this is only for this piece. You can have interconnected ideas and say, all right, well, if I feed the baby all the time, the baby will be a trusting baby. It might be true, but it's not necessarily true because there are other things that might make the baby mistrusting. Um, so just try to remember that everything is connected. Um, Normal development includes a wide range of differences. So when you say someone is normal, they probably are because normal is, think of a whole giant piece of paper and then just cutting off a very sliver of one end of it, like a couple centimeters. The people on that sliver would be the not normal group, and the people in the rest of the large paper are normal. It's just our development is different, our looks are different, our interests are different, so that's a big part. Children shape their development and influence others' responses to them. So children seek to learn, children seek for adventure, for fun, enjoyment, right? But they're also trying to take in the world and go through the world through their own eyes. There's historical and cultural context that we'll talk about, and early experience is very important, but always remember children are resilient. A couple of bad experiences can shape a kid's life. I'm not doubting that at all, but kids are resilient. They bounce back. So sometimes my wife and I would yell at our kids, especially when they were younger, still today too, but when they're younger, and we're like, oh man, I think we yelled at them too much. And we're like, nah, they're fine. So kids get in trouble. as long as there's some kind of talking after that and some learning um, aspect to it, it doesn't mean they have to learn, but you provided an opportunity for them to learn from their mistake. That's an important part of um, child development. Self-efficacy. So check these questions out. I'll tell you what self-efficacy is. So self-efficacy is the belief in yourself that you can do something at a high level. So if I was to say, all right, we're going to go skiing, you take the black diamond. So in class, we would talk about this in depth and things that you're good at, but think, are you going down that black diamond on skis or a snowboard, or are you trying to walk down the hill and save your life? So if you said, I'm walking down the hill, your self efficacy for skiing down that black diamond slope is low. But what if I said driving to class on time and being ready when the professor comes in? If you're like, yeah, I'm always on time, I'm that kind of person, and your self efficacy would be high. If you're low again, you're not making it to class on time. You're going to be the kid that walks in late. Right? So self efficacy is based in very specific activities. So if we said soccer or cheerleading or gymnastics or writing a paper or reading, right? Reading text. I'm super slow at reading text. So my self-efficacy is low for reading, but it's high for remembering what I read. Like I can remember and connect ideas while I'm reading, but I won't read very quickly. All right. So try to think of the 5 things you're best at and write these things down. And then try to think of 5 things that you're just not good at today. Maybe something you're still working on. It could be something I mentioned in the introduction video was citing references in your paper, like giving the author credit for what they said rather than you just plagiarizing and not giving them credit. So that's something that you definitely want to get better at. If you're not good at it now, at the end of this class, you should be good at it. All right. So here's what I put. 5 things you're best at: organizing, planning, applying skills, picking people apart. So if we were in class together, I would, by class 3 or 4, or week 3 or 4, I'd be able to start checking your personality. Who are the talkers? Who are not the talkers? Who are the um, people who will give examples and provide information for me to work off of? And I'll be able to try to pinpoint your personality. And I like doing that. And I like joking. I like fooling around and having fun in class. Um, 5 things I'm not good at: dancing, skating, grammar in papers. So when I write a paper, I have to read it like 3 or 4 times. Um, I don't like giving up my free time, um, and handling others being disorganized. My wife checked these too. So she agrees with everything I wrote on here. Um, so just in case I was like, oh, am I got this on point here of what I'm not good at today? So I'm definitely better at grammar than I've ever been, but I'm not perfect. We're going to talk about babies. So before we talk about babies, what goes in to having a baby in a perfect world? So there are a ton of things that go into it. So parenting. Before you have a baby, talk to your person that you're trying to have a baby with, right? Even if you're adopting, you better have some kind of same parenting style, or at least one that complements the other person. Your family dynamic is important. So that's in-laws, aunts, uncles. Um, what do you see your family living like? Are you living in poverty and having a kid and saying we'll be fine, or are you educated and saying, okay, I'm going to have a baby at 30 because I'll be out of school, I should have a good job by then, blah 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 blah. All right, so that's important. your compatibility with the other person is crazy. Your eating, your activity level, the friends that you have, your organizations that you join, joking, looks, sex, religion, money, which is your SES, that's your socioeconomic status, and your motivation, right? If someone wants to sit on the couch all day and watch TV, and you're a go-getter and you have a high activity level, that might be hard unless you're good with separating all the time. So, and where do you want to be in the future? So these are some of the things you really want to focus on, and it's important to think about this in terms of your future, because these are things that could dramatically affect your relationship moving forward. Because when you do have that child, you are going to put stress on every part of your relationship. So talking about it ahead of time is really a good idea. And the last part is, where do you want to be when you finally settle down geographically? Where do you want to be in your occupation? And again, style of parenting. And we're going to go over that in class, but I want to make sure we keep hitting that, because if you have two styles of parenting, you're going to have a kid who's confused, or a kid who will learn to manipulate one parent over the other. So these are things that you have to start to think about. And I'll give you a second to read those. So if you can, try to write stuff down. Pause the video, take a few minutes to even write down how your family raised you. What did they do? What were your rules? Were the rules good? Were the rules just absurd? We're reading a book in my family right now. It's called Sticks Malone, and um, the kid Sticks is always outside, and he's just doing things that he wants to do. And I just get this picture of, we're not done the book yet, but his parents are just like laissez-faire, like, he'll be fine. He can go do whatever he wants. Like, that's full freedom. That's not my parenting style. So when I see that, I get a little like, oh man, you can't leave the kid unattended too long because they get in trouble, or, what if they need help, something like that. So rules are a big deal. And were you happy? Did your family grow up happy? Like, when they saw you in the morning, were they happy? When you got up in the morning, were you happy for them? Right? And think about your extended family, and your brothers and sisters too. Should you move children up or keep them back in relation to school? So if your kid was a little smarter, should you push them up and push the education, maybe sacrifice the social part? Or do you keep them where they are and just let them be really, really successful? This is a big question in our class, because this could dramatically affect the other parts. Remember, we're focusing on physical, so that means your kid could be a little smaller than the other kids. Social, which means if you're pushing him up, he or she could be the smallest one in the class, or they could be the most immature in the class. They'll definitely It will definitely be noticed that they uh, didn't start with everyone else, so they got pushed up. So that might be something. Is your kid mature enough to handle that? And then, how much work do you put on kids? So should we really push their work ethic in school? If you look at Asian countries, the answer is yes, they do. They push school um, very hardcore, whereas depending on where you live in the United States, what state you live in, schools can be very laid back. Like, just a learning process. You'll be fine as long as you learn to do these things. New Jersey is not a state like that. New Jersey is very uh, forefront in the educational race. So if you go any states, you're looking at California, Connecticut, and New Jersey are usually the top 1, 2, 3 states who really do well in their overall education of all students. All right. Are we active or reactive? So John Locke coined a term tabula rasa, and that means a blank slate. So when you're born, you are just like a blank piece of paper and reacting to everything that happens in the world. So your mom says hi, you react and say hi. Or are we Rousseau's, it's Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Noble Savages. So this is where you are an active person in your life, where you seek out um, like the natural world to learn from. So instead of sitting back and waiting for someone to come in and say hi to you, you go and seek out someone to say hi. You go dig in the dirt and see what you can find. You are the active person that is creating learning opportunities in your life. So you don't have to answer the question now, but your answer to this question will put your personality perspective and how you treat people into a kind of category. So a reactive child is a hunger sponge. So they work more like a machine. When they get hungry, they eat. They eat to enjoy. So that's more of like a robot, though. It's more of like a robot. So I always seek the active part because you're looking to create experiences, you're motivated to learn. It's not that people aren't reactive. It's just that when I think about things, I am very active. I want to learn. I want to read a book. I want to play a video game. So I want to do things that I keep learning from. All right, different types of psychological perspectives. Now this is on here. There are 5 different ones. There's neuroscience, cognitive, brain, behavioral is what you do, humanistic is looking for the future and thinking how good the future could be, and then there's the psychodynamic, which is analyzing how you think and learn. So let's look at these perspectives. You can pause it here if you want to read these more in depth. But when you do go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, if you ever have to go to one, each one practices one of these 5 ways of their technique to analyze you. So if you're going to a cognitive psychologist, they're going to focus on how you think and understand the world through talking to you and listening to your answers and things like that. If you don't like that approach, you want to pick a different psychologist to go to, because if you go to the humanistic perspective, you're thinking of someone who wants to grow and develop and be all that you can be, but they're not going to put a lot of emphasis on past behavior. So the past is the past, but humanistic perspective moves you forward, because yeah, you might not be great yesterday, but today you could be great. Tomorrow you can be even better. So there's like I kind of look at it like steps. The humanistic perspective is steps in your house. So every day you take another step. Every day you take another step. Every day you take another step. So it's very important to have that kind of philosophy. If you're not a huge fan on those two, behavioral perspective focuses on what you do rather than what you think. So what you do doesn't involve anything in your head. So did you say hi back to that person when they came in the room? Did you look down when they looked at you? Did you cross your arms when the teacher was talking to you? Did you hang your head low when you got in trouble? Like, they look for all those things. So those 3 on the right are really, really cool to talk about. The neuroscience perspective is just focusing on how the physical aspects of your body come together and how you release different chemicals depending on the situation that you're in, and then that will affect your behavior. The psychodynamic perspective is motivated by deep inner thoughts the forces in our head that we might not be totally aware of. And how can that, our underlying thoughts that we might not even be able to get to, be generating our personality output? So that's like a whole, that's like a deep thing that would focus much on your past. And that's what I get the picture of, like you laying in a chair talking to a psychologist about all your problems in the past and how you dealt with them and things like that. So that's going on to um, more of like Freudian, Erickson, things like that, where they focused on the the person and what they have done in the past. All right. If you think of a topic, terrorism, being a teacher, student, a famous person, something else, choose a topic and let's define how each perspective would look at neuroscience, psychodynamic, behavior, cognitive, or humanistic. So that's something we would do in class. If you want to do it and you want to send me an email and see how you're thinking about it, totally cool. Freud, you probably went over this before, so I'm going to skip Freud for now, and then we'll get back to him later. If you see, he has sort of the same month range where he has like an oral fixation, an anal fixation, phallic, latency, genital period. And these periods we'll talk about, but we're not going to focus as much on Freud as we do on Erickson and Piaget in this class. But he does have some overlapping ideas. Erickson's going to be our biggest one. When you see this, I put a little link down there that you could go to. You just look up Erik Erikson, and the hawaii.edu will come up, and you can get a little information from there, and it's in your book, and it's something that we're really going to focus on in this class. So you could screenshot this if you want. Just keep it on the side. Piaget, we went over his earlier in this. Screenshot this too. This is something that's going to be good to talk about as we go through the cognitive development of children. Piaget also has a couple other things that we'll talk about, how we organize things, how we create categories in our heads. So those categories will become organized into something called schemas. So if I said, what's a four-legged animal? You might have a dog right away, but you also have a cat, a lion, an elephant, and anything else that you might have said. That's a schema for a four-legged animal. But what if I said, what animals are black? Now you're thinking, well, cats can be black, dogs can be black, zebras have black on them, right? So a schema for a black animal might be a little bit different and harder, because how many times do you really think about that? And then adaptation and accommodation are big things, big terms in Piaget's theory. Adaptation is new information is added to old information, and accommodation is where we include new information. So it's brand new. So think of this. Adaptation is where you learn math and you just keep adding math to it. Accommodation is the technology that's happening in our world so fast. So, we have computers, then we have cell phones, then we have cell phones that pretty much are a computer, and now we're going to have, electric vehicles. Never had that before. 10 years ago that wasn't a thing, but now it's something that's coming. In the future, we're going to have air taxis. You can look up a company called Joby. It's really neat looking. Like, once you start knowing all this new information that's happening, it's really wild. Other people to mention, Vygotsky has a sociocultural theory, which is really cool, and he goes into this zone of proximal development and scaffolding, which are huge in education and child learning. And information processing theorists, they're not a stage like progression. So information processing is you just get better every day when you're learning things, you get better at organizing, categorizing, and faster at doing those things. So you become better. You remember more, and when you forget, you relearn, and then you reinforce that information. And we'll go over that a little more in depth in the memory section too. Behaviorists, Skinner and Bandura are going to be huge in our class with classical conditioning. Skinner created, Pavlov created classical conditioning with his dogs and the salivating, which you should have went over in Psych 101. And Skinner did operant conditioning, which is the stimulus response. And that's the cool part about our class. When we get the behavioral section, we'll talk about how stimulus response can be used to even work with people who are difficult to work with, whether it be an adult or a child. And you can really reward people in ways that get them on your side so you can actually get work done. Bandura adds the social part, the social cognitive part, to the behavioral part, which is really neat because he is using two different perspectives and combines them, and he really changes the world when he does that in the psychological perspective, because now behaviorism is added to how people think and interact with each other. If you look at this from all your perspectives, is walking good or bad? So if you said, oh, walking, that's great. Well, it's not great if you get mugged around the corner. So one day, if you walked around a corner in your street and you turned right on the Lafayette Street, and in Lafayette Street, it's a little shady there, but you never had any problems, but you walked down there and you got mugged. All right. So then you're like, all right, you got over it. The guy took your money or whatever. So you walk down Lafayette Street, you get mugged again. All right. So now taking a walk is becoming more of a danger down that Lafayette Street. So the next time you have to go that way, you're probably taking a different route. So walking could be bad. But if you were one of those people who is walking good, walking's good, right? It's healthy. You get out, fresh air, you move around. You don't have to worry about any of these illnesses we have with all the masks and everything that we have to wear sometimes. So that's really cool. But you have to look at it from every perspective in this class. You can't only look at it from your perspective. So I gave you the part about if you got mugged. But what if you're walking and you got a kiss from a beautiful person that you liked? I would keep walking. I think it's a great idea. I'd walk all day. So keep looking at different scenarios and a positive side and the negative side. Always learn from both. All right, here's some terms from Bandura. You'll see the three there. Self-efficacy is at the bottom. We kind of went over that a little bit today. And these are just other people that we went over. Lorentz at the bottom. But you'll see Bowlby has a really, really cool attachment theory. And we'll go over that when we start with the birth and all that stuff. All right, we're going to do Bronfenbrenner system. We'll just skim over that for now. It's how you interact with the people around you. It's a systems approach to thinking about the people we come in contact with the most. And I think his system's going to change a little bit because now we have more of a global society where we interact with people everywhere with the way internet and business is used today. This is another picture of his system approach. All right, we're going to skip over some of this. This is a psychological continuum. If you want to look at it, you can. You'll also have the PowerPoint. So in psychology, there are 4 basic ways to um, acquire knowledge. So you have to ask questions, and those questions will lead to more questions as we move forward. But after you answer those questions, you have an explanation. So you have to figure out, is the explanation great or not great? And if it's good, then you might actually do research. You might actually go out, perform. It could be something as simple as a survey, or you could do like an experiment in a lab to see how it works out in a more controlled environment, or um, you could do something as easy as going out and asking people one question. Uh, you could do it over the internet. They have SurveyMonkey and 100 other different survey things that you could use. But research doesn't have to be super intense to get information, especially if you're just going in your geographic area. And then after you get the research and you actually say, all right, what does this research mean? You have to communicate findings. You have to say, this was my initial question. This is what we found from this particular group we asked. And then after you have that, then you can actually say, this is our findings. And that will be your conclusion about what happened. And then you pose more questions. So then it becomes cyclical and it goes back to the beginning again. So here's how you do research. You identify questions, formulate, and it just goes down a line. All right, a couple things you should know from Psych 101 is your hypothesis. That's the prediction. That's what you think is going to happen, and allows for something to be tested in a particular way. Now, for something to be tested, it has to be operationally defined, which means you have to have a specific way to categorize and measure whatever you're talking about. So a good example of this is love. How do you categorize love? You can't see it, but you can say, oh, she loves him. Well, you can't really say, because love is a really, really difficult thing to operationalize, such as hate. So you'd have to say, to define love, love is defined in our research as getting 4 or more hugs a day from a caregiver, a mother, father, aunt, uncle, whoever. So that would show that the person is loved. So it could also be the love comes from the food that's provided. So if they get 3 meals a day, that shows that the parent is loving them through food, right? So you're taking care of their physical needs. So operationally defining things is very important. So if I said, how could you operationally define anger? Well, anger could be verbal or nonverbal, right? I could yell at you, and that might show anger, but I could also kick you, and that might show anger. So we have to think about, how are we defining anger? Are we using the sound of our voice? Is it like a decibel level? Or are we going to use a physical aspect of it, like the yelling, screaming, punching a pillow, something like that? Right. Here are different types of research that you can look at. In research, you're going to have a couple things that are very important. First is, when you do real experimental treatments, you have a control group. That's just a group that doesn't get any of your variable. That's your independent variable. So they're just going to be a group that goes through the same process as everyone else, except for the independent variable. Your experimental group, now you might have 1, 2, 3 of these or more. Your experimental group is going to get the independent variable. So everybody gets a red taffy every single day. So that's what the experimental group would get. The red taffy would be your independent variable. So your variable is something that you think is going to change your experimental group in a positive or negative way. So you think the red taffy might um, make them hyper compared to the control group. So at the very end of your research, you'll have a dependent variable. So they're the outcomes. So how did the control group match up against the experimental group? And that's the basic of that research. So you also have to choose people. How do you choose them? A good way is random assignment. You just pick people at random, and the more people you pick, the better sample you'll get of the population. You're never going to get the whole population. You're talking about millions of people. So you have to pick a sample of the group that you're looking at. If you're going for high school kids, then you want to pick rural, urban, suburban, or you might just want to focus on one of those, and then the next research would be the other group. I'll do rural first, I'll see the results, then I'll do urban, see the results, I can compare the results, and you can keep researching like that. There are ethics in research. I'll let you read these. Just pause it if you need to read more time to read. Informed consent. Make sure everyone in the study knows what's happening in the study. So if there are risks, are you sure they're volunteering? Make sure that everyone knows everything and documents get signed to protect yourself. Is animal research good or bad? Whatever it is, you have to make sure you're not causing any extra pain and you are not there to cause any death to an animal. And you have to make sure that the animal won't be released in a poor way. Validity, a little bit harder topic, but you can read over validity. But validity is we're making sure that whatever you're researching is going to be a valid finding from group to group. So if you researched teachers in New Jersey, we have to check it with teachers in Indiana too to see if they have the same interaction, the same dependent variable, the same results. So one of the things people do when they do pills, they'll do a sugar pill, which is a placebo. So that sugar pill, if you take birth control pills, you take sugar pills, that just gives a person something to put in their body, but it won't change anything because it's just sugar. Right? It's not going to hurt them in an adverse way or change any findings. So a huge part of this class is just thinking critically. Like, why are we doing this research? Was the study conducted well? And are the results presented fairly? So when people do research, and you read research in this class and in your other classes, you have to look at who's publishing this. Like if it's the tobacco community, and they're publishing and saying that nicotine's not that bad for you. Well, if they're the ones writing it, excuse me, if they're the ones writing it, then it could be skewed. It doesn't mean it's 100% true. If it's the American Pediatric Association, if they're saying that nicotine's not bad for kids, then you'd have a better finding than if a tobacco company published their own research. Not that they lie, but they could lie. They have a reason to lie to sell their product. So always look at what did the research say, who does it affect, and who published it. All right, the rest is brain stuff. If you want to go over it, it's all stuff you did before. I put it in there. So I think that was the end of our chapter. There are some perception things we can talk about too in there. That's not in your chapter. So I think we just finished chapter 1. Guys, have a great day. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say about chapter 1.